Unit 4 is based on a very interesting passage which adopts a humorous, supposedly light-hearted tone, but is in fact very critical of certain things. It is a scathing critique. So this incongruity between the supposed light-heartedness, at least on the face of it, and the gravity of what the author is saying may be confusing. It may throw you a little. Let's take a look at the questions one by one. Question 13 asks us about the aims of the people who gave the narrator these instructions about how to behave in New York City. Option C, persuade him to stay off the streets, immediately rings false, because in fact, there are lots of instructions for which streets to stick to. Don't go north of 96th Street, keep to the outer edge of the sidewalk, and so on. So do walk the streets, but in certain places only, and in a certain way only. So C we can discard. The other three are actually sort of plausible, and this is when we need to think about if you were to explain to somebody else what these people were doing, would you say they were giving him a sense of New York's layout? Well, you probably wouldn't. Perhaps they were trying a little bit to draw him a mental map of what were the acceptable and what were the less acceptable, the undesirable places to go to. But this was not the primary aim of their instructions. Were they helping him fit into New York society? Now, in line 5, New York streets are described as enemy territory. And in fact, and we'll come on to this later with the other questions, there isn't really such a thing as New York society here. And finally, A, help him to avoid trouble, is the option that makes sense. It is entirely designed to help him stay safe, to help him not talk to people he shouldn't be talking to, according to the people giving him advice. A is your correct answer here. Question 14 has the potential to be tricky because it deals with tone. When we are asked about the manner in which the instructions are given, we are essentially asked about tone. And the tricky thing about tone questions is that you need to figure out whose tone they are talking about. And here indeed, if we look at A, self-mocking, is the advice given to the narrator in a self-mocking tone? Well, not at all. The people who are saying these things to him are dead serious. They are trying to protect him from what they see as terrible danger. The mockery is introduced by the narrator himself because he disagrees with their evaluation of New York City, with their worldview. So this is classic distinguish whose tone we are talking about here. Is the tone gentle but serious? The tone that the advice is given in does not come across as gentle at all. All the repetitions of don'ts and nevers, the insistence of it is not at all gentle. Is the tone balanced and objective? Now, when somebody says stick to quote unquote white subway lines, that is a bigoted and prejudiced line. It is not at all balanced and objective, so we can discard that straight away, which leaves us with dramatic and insistent, which fits perfectly. Raid over enemy territory. The repetitions of don'ts and nevers, the absolute conviction of the people who are giving this advice really does come across. Question 15 asks us about the point of view that this advice given to the author is trying to propagate. And it is a classic GAMSAT question where you can discard two options pretty much straight away, and then you can agonize over the other two. A, commitment to promoting the rule of law amid urban chaos. There is no evidence whatsoever of promoting the rule of law. In fact, that would involve a civic engagement on the part of the advice givers that is simply not there. All they seem to want to do is to avoid dangerous areas. They seem to have no desire to make New York any safer, even as they believe that it is extremely dangerous. B, civil liberties for all members of society. We can see evidence straight away that directly contradicts that. Evidence such as white subway lines would suggest that civil liberties for all members of society is not something that the advice givers are interested in. This therefore leaves us with C and D, and it can seem like a tough choice. If we look at D, and it says things like battleground, and of course we have the description of New York as enemy territory, it's tempting to go for D. However, the conflicting ideologies that fight for dominance is what falsifies this claim, because there is no evidence of anybody's ideology other than that of the advice givers. And insofar as the advice givers are ideological, we know that they are racist and classist. We don't know anything else. The point is that there is only one ideology on show here, and it seems like the advice givers really wouldn't think so much about anybody else. They would find it hard to imagine that somebody else might have an ideology that is just as valid as their own. So therefore, C, a desire to protect the interests of one sector of society against encroachment, is the best fit. All the advice to stay within certain areas, don't go farther than this point to the west and farther than this point to the south, and so on. Stay on the white lines. The white lines is very telling, isn't it? All of this is a view of us against everybody else, everybody who is not white and relatively prosperous. Question 16 asks, what did the advice givers want to do with their advice? And once again, we can discard two options pretty much straight away. Option B, did the advice givers make him want to reflect on his own values? Highly unlikely. It looks much more like they expected the author to take their advice as dogma. Remember earlier on, we said the advice was dramatic and insistent. It aims to convince. It does not aim to start a dialogue or reflection of any kind. Option C, likewise, instead of reassuring him that he'll be okay, their advice aims to instill a sense of panic, a sense of danger. Danger is everywhere. And in order to survive, you need to do what we are telling you to do. So this leaves us with A and D. And D is tempting because, in fact, if the author were to follow the advice being given to him, he would be unable to enjoy the excitement and diversity of street life. However, this would be the secondary effect of his following that advice. And remember that the question asks us not about the effect, but about the intention of the advice givers. And their intention is not to stop him from enjoying life. Their intention is to keep him safe from what they see as extreme danger. Question 17. How do the people in the moving crowd feel? Not how they come across, but how they feel. This is a key difference, as we will see. Do they feel confident? Well, they are stiff with the boiled look on their faces. There is simply no lexical field there that would suggest confidence of any kind. So C is out. Do they feel bored? Now, we know they are avoiding eye contact. They are keeping their eyes on the line of the horizon. So once again, there is no evidence of boredom. When one is bored, one perhaps searches for something to look at. This is the opposite. They have a very fixed gaze and they don't want to look at anybody. A, degraded. Now, it does say they have a boiled look on their faces, so that's okay. However, the reason this seems tempting is because the people in the moving crowd come across as degraded to the author, to the narrator. He's seeing them as degraded. They do not see themselves as degraded. They do not feel degraded. On the contrary, the whole point is that they feel that they are better than people who are standing around looking for eye contact. So they feel the opposite of degraded. Therefore, this leaves us with frightened. And there is a lot of evidence for being frightened there. They are stiff. They accelerate when they realize that the author is trying to make eye contact with them. They avoid him at all costs. And they pass him with an unusually wide berth. So they are avoiding him as a threat. They are treating him as a threat. They are indeed frightened. Now you can see that these questions are playing around with point of view here. While question 17 asked how the people in the moving crowd felt, question 18 shifts that perspective a little bit and asks how is it that they want other people to believe they feel, which is not the same thing. Fearful, do they want people to believe that they are fearful, that they are scared? Well, no, of course they don't. They want to mask their fear. Do they want to give the impression of being evasive? Now, de facto, they do give that impression. They are being evasive, but that is not the impression that they are out to give. That is not the aim. D, threatening, is a pretty straightforward no, because there is no evidence for it. They don't want to seem threatening. They just want to mind their own business. Finally, that leaves us with C, purposeful, and there is lexical evidence for purposeful there. No eye contact. Eyes are locked ahead of them. They accelerate when there is the remotest possibility of somebody slowing them down. Question 19 tests our literary sensibilities. The word warm has many potential meanings, and we are being asked to determine what exactly it means here in I began to warm. This is another case of being able to discard two options fairly quickly. See the close, polluted atmosphere. There is no evidence really that it is this that is causing the author to warm. And the same for looking boiled like the passers-by. There is obviously a connection between the word boiled and the word warm, but this is not the sense of warm that is being employed here. So C and D are out. There is no evidence for either of them. We are therefore left with A and B, and a feeling of well-being really is out straight away as well, because it is the opposite of what the narrator is experiencing. If we look at line 15, the narrator says, I have never felt myself to be the target of such frank contempt. And what he is warming up with is with reciprocal feeling. So he is warming up with contempt for the people who are looking at him contemptuously. Question 20. What kind of insight the author has gained as a result of this experience? Now, A, we can discard straight away because it is simply not relevant. Is there a lot of urban decay? We don't know because the surroundings themselves are barely mentioned. It is all about people and the relationship between people. B would suggest that the author has come round to the position of his advisors, at least partly. It would suggest that he has come to agree with them or at least see their point of view, and nothing could be further from the truth. Has he gained insight into why people end up on the streets? That again is not mentioned at all. One might be tempted to choose this because street people are mentioned, but he is talking about those who are already on the streets. There is nothing in the passage about how they come to be on the streets in the first place. So finally, this leaves us with C, motives for street violence. And although we arrived at this through elimination, we can see that there is very direct evidence for motives for street violence. The author says, had I stayed sitting on the fire hydrant for another hour, I would have been ready to pick up a weapon and attack someone just to show them that I am human. Question 21, the final question of Unit 4, asks us what the writer is imagining in the last paragraph. Is he imagining what it is like to live in New York all the time? Perhaps, but it is too general. He is imagining living in New York all the time from the point of view of a specific contingent. Is it that the pedestrians are made to feel vulnerable? He is basically saying the opposite of that. Pedestrians obviously are feeling vulnerable, but they are in a position of power and they are ignoring true vulnerability of the people who are homeless, who sit on fire hydrants, and who try desperately to lock eyes with somebody to establish human contact. Those are the vulnerable people, and they are not making the pedestrians feel vulnerable. The pedestrians are feeling vulnerable because of the prejudice and the bigotry that they themselves exhibit. D. How terrifying a street attack would be. On the contrary, by the end of that paragraph, having sat on the fire hydrant and tried to make eye contact, he is fantasizing about at least scaring, if not attacking, at least scaring these pedestrians whom he calls zombies. Which leaves us with C, what it must feel like to be homeless. And indeed, that is the person, the type of person whose perspective the narrator adopts.